Hey all, and welcome back to Fuzzy Dirty Gaming and a new video on the channel. I've had a lot of requests to go through my Tornado Shot character that I league started with because I sort of abandoned it to go and do some budget variants. And I had quite a few hundreds of divines invested into that character, and I've now added a mageblood to it. So I thought I'd bring out a build guide or showcase. It's not going to be a full guide because it is a very expensive build. I just wanted to show my take on Tornado Shot, explain why I've built it this way, and go through the gear and the content that I've been running with the build. Now, I'm not in any way saying this is the best way to build the character. There are a lot of different ways to build Tornado Shot, and if you were just looking at pure damage, then physical conversion is obviously going to be the best route to go. But I wanted to try and get a really good combination of tankiness, clear speed, and damage. I don't do 5 Deli Orb, like 100% Delirious maps, and I don't do Simulacrum, so I don't need crazy damage. This version is capable of doing all of the Uber bosses. It will do any content you want. It may do 100% Deli. I just don't see the point when 4 Deli Orbs is so much easier and the returns are not that different. So the first thing we'll talk about is value for money in terms of the build. And if we're going to be honest, Tornado Shot builds are definitely not value for money if you're looking at purely the content that it completes. However, to me, there's like some fun factor that comes with Tornado Shot that you don't get with many other skills, which obviously a lot of other people must feel as well, which is why they go and run it. So it is very expensive for a build. If you just want to do normal like end game mapping strategies, whether that's Delirium, Harvest, Legion, Scarab, Sextants, whatever you want to do with it, you do not need anywhere near this investment. I just said at the very beginning of the league that I was going to just do one build this league and pump as much currency as I can into it. We're now sort of halfway through the league because it's been extended. I've got about 1.5 mirrors invested, and hopefully by the end of the league, we've got 3 to 4 mirrors invested in the build. So I thought I'd go through where the build is at the moment, talk about its pros and cons, and go through the gear and split the costs up. So before we get to the gear, I just want to really go through how much investment this is in terms of playtime, because if you're not someone who does this as like their main pastime and you might only play like 6 or 7 hours a week, then you're probably never going to be able to have the investment to get this sort of build going. So what I will do when I go through the gear is I'm also going to order everything in importance so that if you add half the budget, you can still get a build going that feels really, really good. So as you can see on screen here, this is the cost of the build in total. And I've had to estimate some things because I crafted a lot of the items myself. The quiver, for example, there's nothing like it available on trade, so I've just given it a value of 25 divines. Could be more, could be less, I'm not really sure. But as you can see, a lot of the build is taken up by, obviously, Mageblood, which cost me 274 divines. The Forbidden Jewels, which I think the cheapest you can get a set for, is probably 25 to 30 divines. I valued them at 35. The Watcher's Eye I bought has skyrocketed in price since I bought it. I think I paid 5 divines for it, and the closest one on the market now is 25 divines. And it's got an Unnatural Instinct, which is also a fairly expensive item, along with Awakened GMP, which again is a hugely, hugely expensive item. So let's jump into the actual items on the build, and we'll go through it step by step. So before we get into the items, the showcases you've just seen, all of them other than Uber Maven were done on a 2 defensive aura setup. So I had both Grace and Determination, but it felt like overkill because I was killing stuff so quickly. So I've dropped Grace and I've added in Anger and the Watcher's Eye to go with it, because that was the biggest DPS increase because I don't have a lot of physical damage. Hatred did not do a lot. Haste makes attack and movement speed probably overkill to the point I can't really control what I'm doing. So I've very recently changed the build to get Anger in, and it adds a lot more DPS. It just makes the Uber bosses pretty much guaranteed. Whereas before I could do them, but I had to make sure I did the mechanics properly. Whereas now I could die a few times and I know I'm still going to get through the encounter with the DPS that I've got. We'll run through all the auras and gems and everything as we go through the build. Now, this isn't a build guide. It's more of a showcase, because when you get to this level of investment, you kind of have to build the character to how you want the character to operate. And also, your gear is going to be specific to the gear you've already got. Like, you're not going to roll exactly the same gear as I've got on my character. So you need to sort of understand what you're looking for, rather than these are the exact mods that are on a chest piece. These are the exact mods that are on gloves. So there's not going to be any crafting. It's just going to go through the gear in general. I'll briefly explain how I crafted each one, but it's not going to be like an in-depth step-by-step guide. So the bow is a fractured 2-arrow bow. And then I've spammed essences, the elemental ones, until I've hit 3 really good prefixes, and then you craft the suffixes. And I've spent about 190 divines on this. It's worth about 65, and it's still not that good. So all I did was I got the prefixes, and then I would lock the prefixes, and then either Ashleen to try and unveil crit with attributes, or I've gone and re-rolled speed, or sorry, augmented speed in Harvest to get attack speed. And I think I rolled prod speed like the first 8 attempts, and it's about 9 divines per try. And I've just failed every single time. The last one I tried, which was weeks ago, I hit like rubbish attack speed again, but it's the best I've got. And because you get so much attack speed in the build, even pushing this up to T2 doesn't make a huge amount of difference. So I've just settled on this bow for now. If I'm ever swinging in currency again, I'll either buy a better one or recraft this one. You obviously want this to be as high quality as possible, so I've got it at 30%. And then I've crafted the attack speed Harvest enchant on it. The helmet, I've just gone with a rare helmet. So it is a tornado shot, fires an additional secondary projectile. The implicits are mana reservation and mana cost of attacks. And then on the helmet, I'm not quite sure how I got intelligence. I don't think you can roll them on an evasion base. But I definitely rolled this helmet with the mana reservation essences, which are loathing. Wait until I hit big life, and then crafted fizz taken as fire as my prefix. This cost quite a few times to roll because I wanted suppression, I wanted life, so obviously it is quite expensive. However, the fizz taken as fire is sort of a nice to have, so you could just settle for crafted life. So you'd roll till you hit suppression, and then you'd craft your life. The amulet is crystallized omniscience, not much more to go through, and I've anointed Art of the Gladiator to cap my accuracy, get a bit more movement speed and attack speed. The quiver I get whispered for constantly when I put this back into my stash tab in error. And it fires an additional arrow, T1 lightning damage, T1 life, T1 prod speed, and T2 damage of bow. So it's very, very, very good. It's not hard to roll a quiver similar to this, but with lesser tiers. And then I always want a spare suffix because I love this frenzy craft on quivers, because it means I don't have to run blood rage and I don't have to run a mastery to get frenzy on bosses, which means I can get more mark effect. The rings are both just standard Omni rings. These are probably like 5 to 6 divines each. This one I've gone for double attributes and chaos res. This one I've gone for triple attributes. I've got -6 to mana cost because my helmet has got a very high tier of mana cost. I didn't mean it to be this high. I was trying to elevate the mana reservation efficiency of skills, and it just keeps sending the reduced mana cost up, which is why I've had to drop these to -6. Otherwise, my tornado shot is 0 mana, and then my inspiration doesn't work. The chest piece cost me quite a bit to craft. I'm not going to go about how I crafted it because it was probably wrong. But it was essentially getting triple suffixes for attributes and then crafting the other mods with Eldritch currency, and it cost quite a lot of money. What I was looking for was either big life and then I could craft more life on top of it, or I was looking for big armor and evasion and then craft life. We ended up getting decent armor and evasion, so we got like nearly 1500 armor and we got 1600 evasion on the chest piece, and then I've just crafted life. At some point, I could obviously keep recrafting this life to get 85, which is the max you can roll. The gloves, I've had these on the character for a long time. I don't really feel a need to change them. They got T1 attack speed, big evasion, big life, spell suppression, and then crafted crit chance and LE damage. The implicits I do need to sort out because I still need some spell suppression, but I think it's like 1 or 2. So I could elevate this rage up definitely and like push the spell suppression down, because getting rage on a hit to a better rate, like 0.8, 0.9, would be much better. The belt is mageblood. We'll go through the flask in a second. And then the last item is the boots. This is different to what I had before because I've actually decided to go with the cannot be shocked and then go for the storm shroud jewel, just because you can get everything you need on boots. So the reason on my implicits I've rolled LE ailments instead of avoid shock is because I can then roll action speed with my embers. If I wanted avoid shock is an ember. That means I can't roll attack speed. Then the rest of the Eldritch Core boot mods are pretty rubbish. So I've rolled 60% chance to avoid being shocked on the boots with essences. Then got 20% chance to avoid ailments. And we pick up 20% from tree. So that covers all of my ailment needs. And then for the flask, I'm going for an onslaught flask with elemental resistances, because this means I just don't need to worry about resistances. I don't have a huge amount of Omni. I think it's about 1300. Yeah, 1300. So it's difficult for me to hit resistance cap. I'll need to get resistance on gear. I'd rather use that to get either more Omni or other attributes or stats. So I've decided to basically give up a suffix on flasks and go for elemental resistances. All of these will be in Stilling Orb to have increased effect. Now, the flasks are not max roll. They're not top of tier 1 for everything. They're all tier 1, but they can be better. I just wanted to get into the build and have a test of it. So some of them could be slightly better in terms of flasks. So we've got a diamond flask with increased crit. an armor flask with increased armor, and then a quicksilver flask with increased attack speed. So like I said, I could instill these to get them to 70 rather than 69 and 68, but for now I'm happy with where they are. So that covers off the gear. We'll quickly go through the gem links. My main 6 link is Anomalous Tornado Shot. No other reason other than it does add a little bit of DPS because we do some fizz damage and we scale elemental damage really, really high. The main reason is to stop me dying to Fizz Reflect in maps because I do a lot of damage. Even though I don't do a lot of physical damage, it's still enough to kill me. I've got Awakened GMP for the extra projectile. We have Trinity Support, Awakened Daily Damage with attacks to avoid Daily Reflect, Divergent Inspiration to lower mana cost, and then we've got increased crit damage. I'm also running a 6-link Ballista with Inspiration, GMP, although I've got Anomalous GMP on here to be fair to lower mana cost, Tornado Shot, crit damage, Focus Ballista, and Ballista Totem Support. So these actually don't cost me anything at all, which is fine because the inspiration from my main skill, as long as you have some form of inspiration, it says your skill supported by inspiration support gain bonuses. So my ballistas will get those bonuses. I have it like this so I can just, if I want to do an Uber fight, I can spam all these so that I've got my 10 Tailwind ready to go. Then as soon as I start hitting with my main skill, I'll get me inspiration and I'll immediately get 10 Gale Force stacks. A lot of the way I built this build is for quality of life. So there's things you could do to get more damage if you wanted to, but I wanted to try and get the best mix of comfort, survivability, and damage that I could, and I think it's worked out pretty well. In the helmet, we have Life Tap, Mark on Hit, Sniper's Mark, and then just a Flame Dash. And we've got a Molten Shell linked with Cast and Damage Taken. This should be Vile Molten Shell. Vitality, just a level 1 because we've got a Watcher's Eye, which we'll come on to in a bit. Defiance Banner, 2020. And then we have Anger, Determination, Enlighten, and Precision. I only need a level 3 Enlighten because we've got quite a lot of mana reservation elsewhere. If you didn't, you might need to get like a level 4. And that's kind of it for the gem setup. Not much more to go through. So we'll run through the tree. So firstly, I path up here to pick up Unnatural Instinct. What this does is allocates any small passives that you haven't allocated on the tree. So we've got really good ones here. We've got Accuracy and Crit Chance. We've got Life. There's a couple of Life on Kill. There's Mana, which actually helps massively. Chaos Resistance. There's just some really, really good mods. Even these like Increased Power Charge Duration and Frenzy Duration help out a little bit. The first cluster jewel is a Sadist, Storm Rider, and Widespread Destruction. You don't path to the back. This is to help me get power charges into the build, and also Sadist, because I'm doing all 3 types of LE damage, is very, very nice. It's 60% increased elemental damage. And then out of here, we've got 2 Streamlined and Repeater cluster jewels. And then socketed into these, we've got our Forbidden Flesh and Flame combo. It doesn't really matter what it is. It's just whatever enables you to get Ricochet, Far Shot, Endless Munitions, Gathering Winds, and Focal Point. Got our Storm Shroud here, which is the jewel that means we get our ailment resistance, ailment avoidance from the shock resistance or shock effect. Have a Lethal Pride here, which has got 2 double damage and 1 Intimidate on it. Other than that, the mods are quite bad. This jewel could be better, but if you want a really good Lethal Pride, they can get really expensive. And then we'll go down to our large cluster here, which is Martial Prowess, Feed the Fury, and Fuel the Fight. This is because I don't have Leech anywhere in the build, so these nodes finished that up nicely, and Martial Prowess is just generally a really, really good node. It's attack speed, accuracy, and damage. And then we have the Watcher's Eye in here, which is crit multi while affected by Anger, which we have just brought Anger into the build. And gain life when you hit an enemy while affected by Vitality, which is why I have the level 1 Vitality. And then we've just got a very mediocre Corrupted Blood jewel here. The ones I wanted were sort of 20 to 30 divines. I really didn't want to pay that for a jewel. So this just gives a bit of life, speed, and damage, and our Corrupted Blood immunity. And that's kind of it for the overview. When I go into Uber bosses, I normally run Soul of Arakali and then the one where you get your life charges gained. If I'm mapping, it's going to be Lunaris and Abarath. So really the way I've built the character is, yeah, try and get as much defense as I can along with DPS. The POB DPS for 1 arrow is about 3.2, 3.3 million. And obviously we fire 11 arrows. So on big targets like the blob, for example, you're probably going to hit with nearly every arrow. So you're going to get like 30 million DPS. On enemies with smaller hitboxes, you might only hit with half your arrows. So you're talking like 15, 16, 17 million DPS. But I've never felt like DPS was a problem in all the content that I've done. So let's just quickly run into the POB and have a look at the stats. Now, obviously with Mageblood, it's much easier to know your stats because your flasks are always active. So everything I've ticked here is basically up all of the time. We'll always be shocking, chilling, and igniting. We're obviously always going to have all our flasks up. We're going to have at least 20 rage. In fights that are a bit longer, although not many fights last more than 20 seconds, you'd have a bit more. We're always going to have crit recently, and because we get hit by every spell and every other attack, we're always going to have been hit recently, and we'll always have our resonance count. So this is kind of an accurate assumption of DPS along with our relic in here. So our pinnacle boss DPS is, as I say, 3.3 million. I've set the full DPS at just half of the arrows hitting. And then if we go to uber boss damage, you're looking at like 5 to 6 million DPS. On big hitboxes, you're going to get up to 10 million. So it's more than enough to do all the uber content. But obviously you'd expect a build that's got this currency invested into it to be able to do that. In terms of defenses in the game, so this is without our frenzy charges up, so we will have more evasion than this. I think we cap out at about 48 to 50%. We're obviously resistance capped. It'd be nice to get a bit more. Spell suppress capped, ailment immune, and then we've got 31,000 armor and 6.5k evasion. So the evasion is good enough. Evasion doesn't really help in a lot of uber boss fights because a lot of the stuff is spells, and also there's some attacks that can't be evaded, so having evasion or grace is pretty much pointless. So I did take the decision to drop grace. I don't die when I'm mapping anyway, so I don't need the extra defenses from grace. And anger just gives the extra damage you want to make uber bosses much more comfortable. And then in terms of offensive, now we do get power charges in a mapping environment, so our crit chance is going to be better than it's stated here. So if we go into offense on our tornado shot, the crit chance is 81%, but once our power charges are up, we're kind of pretty much at cap. I think it's about 97%. Let's go and just have a quick look in POB. Yeah, 95% crit chance with 515% crit multi, which is ample enough. Now, this is on a level 99 character. My other character is 100. I just can't be bothered to swap all the gear around and send everything over and respec the tree just for 1 point. So at some point, I'm sure this character will get to 100 if I stop deciding to uber boss, because I'm very bad at all of them. And I do take deaths on most of them. I think Sirius, I've done deathless a couple of times. Maven, I'm just really bad at it. I think the issue with mageblood when you're uber bossing is you move so quick, it's sometimes often difficult to avoid stuff because you run too quickly. So uber maven, I was thinking she was targeting an attack in a particular area, I'd run, and then I'd end up actually running back into the attack because I was so quick. This is probably just a learning curve because I've not used mageblood, but most of my deaths in uber bosses come from me being too quick avoiding attacks or spells. But overall, I think the only one I haven't done is Shaper, just because I hate that fight. It takes too long. I've no interest in really completing it. I don't think there's any challenges where you've got to do them all. But yeah, I've done all the other uber bosses and they're really, really comfortable. So we'll just cover off further upgrades that I would like to make to the build. Like, there is a lot of currency invested in it already, but there's lots I can do to make the build even better. And I did say at the beginning of the league that I'm going to try and just push one character all the way this league. What I'll normally do is maybe put 50 divines into a build, get it to where it does the content I like to complete, and then I'll re-roll into a different skill. But I'm really enjoying this, and the more I play it, the more I'm starting to understand a bit more about how these kind of builds worked and how to put it together. So I think we will just do this character, and then if I do decide to end the character, then I'll probably just do an SSF run or something for the rest of the league. So what are my plans to further improve the character? So the first thing we can do is obviously get our implicits up to better levels, like get this determination and curse effect pushed up, get the rage on hit pushed up, and just get that better generally, because that will improve DPS and survivability. Obviously get these flasks so that they're max roll across the board for all of those. It's not mega expensive to do that, so that's something I could certainly do in the next few days. And then I think the next upgrade I want to do is I would like to drop this corrupted jewel here because it's not very good. What I would like to do is move this jewel, the Storm Shroud, over here. And then what we'll probably do is either buy or craft some of these cluster jewels because they're quite easy to craft and not too expensive to buy. And then we'll just corrupt them until we hit corrupted blood. That then solves my corrupted blood issue. Then I could do something like a Thread of Hope here. And then I could drop these nodes. They don't offer loads. Like, these 3 nodes are not amazing. I think we could pick up 3 very good nodes with a Thread of Hope here. I just don't know what one to do yet. Most Tornado Shot builds go for the Uber one, but that's because it lands on a lot of fizz and crit nodes, which I don't really need. So I need to have a play around with all the different Thread of Hopes and see what fits the build better. If we can end up landing on a spell suppression node somewhere that gives us a bit of evasion, that would be good, as then I can drop the spell suppression on the gloves and add something in like Mark Effect. But I think that would be the next thing I want to do, would be a Thread of Hope here once I've got Corrupted Blood somewhere else. That's going to definitely add some damage to the build. Ideally, I would love to try and get some more max res or some chaos resistance. So again, we need to maybe look at ways to do that. Like, could we pick up the Unwavering Stance jewel, and then we can get some resistances here. But I'm kind of not sure I want to pump more defenses into the build. I don't do all the content easy. Like Simulacrum, I've died a few times, and I think if the mod's really stacked against me in wave 29 and 30, I would fail. But I think with this sort of character, the more DPS you can do, the better. You do need a form of defensive layers because you are going to get hit, and you don't want to die every time you get hit. But I think from where I am at the moment, pushing DPS more is probably going to help me survive than putting more defenses in. So the other things, yeah, outside the Thread of Hope are try and cap the chaos resistance, maybe get some max res, maybe some endurance charges. There's lots of things I can do. So I'm definitely not done with this build yet. But the next step is going to be get the implicit sorted, get my Flaster perfect, get a Corrupted Blood medium jewel here, and then I can fit a Thread of Hope in here and pick up some more nice nodes. I think that's it for the build guide. I don't think there is much more to go through. If you've got any questions, leave them in the comments. I'm not going to bring, like I say, a full guide out for this because it's very expensive. And when you get to a certain point, you really have to tailor gear specific to what you need. Like, you could add all this gear but have slightly different stats, and you're missing Omni, you're missing mana, you're missing accuracy. So you do really need to know what you're doing when you build one of these characters to be able to make it a successful character. All you need to do is go on POE Ninja and have a look at some of the level 100s, and they're terrible, a lot of them. So I don't know if they're RMTs or they've paid for carries to 100 and put together what they think is a good build. There is some really, really bad builds on POE Ninja. So if you want to build a Tornado Strike character, find a reputable player that's got a decent Fizz conversion variant if that's what you want to play, and try and understand how the build is put together and copy that build as best as you can. But don't just go into POE Ninja, pull the highest DPS and put the build together, because it's likely built for a specific need, like rinse and Uber bosses in a second. Or it could be a build that always runs with an aura bot, and that if you run it on its own, you're just going to get obliterated by any of the content that you do. So be very careful if you do want to pump loads of currency into a build. Just make sure that that build functions and is what you want to get enjoyment out of the game. And that's it for the video. Thank you very much for watching. Take care and see you in the next one.